So another great question I just got from a student, and they wanted to know, how are you supposed to live when you really only get paid 4 times a year through BMI or ASCAP? And if in case you're wondering, yes, you only get paid essentially 4 times a year. With BMI, they actually wrap up your domestic and international royalties into one check, and you get that once a quarter. With ASCAP, they actually split it up into 2 different checks. So you'll get a writer's check one month, and then the next month you'll get the international one. But essentially, you are only getting paid 4 times a year. So right now, you're probably on either a bi-weekly payment schedule or maybe a monthly payment schedule with your current employer, or however you're making your income. And so the idea of only making 4 paychecks a year might seem incredibly crazy and really scary. And it is. It absolutely is, because it is a massive change for most people who are not used to getting paid so infrequently. Your royalty checks can be very big, but of course, you can't really plan for how big they are or how small they're going to be. And if you're only getting paid a couple of times a year, you obviously do need to do things a little bit differently. You need to budget things a little bit differently. So the student wanted to know, like, how did I do it? How did I transition from, I basically I think I was getting paid on a monthly basis with the company I was with, which is actually kind of unusual in the States. Most of the time you get paid every 2 weeks. This was a startup company though, so we only got paid once a month. So that kind of helped me actually, because it started me off in this process of, I get paid once every 4 weeks. I better make sure that money lasts me 4 weeks. And it really actually started training me a couple of years before I got into TV film licensing to start budgeting. But if you're not used to that at all, you better start training now. Okay. So the first thing I can tell you, and I've written it down 3 times, is budget, budget, budget. If you have not sat down and actually written out what your monthly bills are in terms of if you pay rent, if you have a mortgage, your utilities, your gas, groceries, any expenses like including cable, like if you subscribe to Netflix, Hulu, if you have streaming services, if you have video game services that you're paying for, whatever you're paying for every single month, you need to tally all of that up and have a solid foundational number of, okay, let's say it's $2,000. Okay, I need $2,000 to live to pay all of my bills. That should be something that you've had written down somewhere. And if you've never done that before, it's a very empowering thing to be able to actually write that down and have a solid number of what you need to be having, at least in your bank account, to be able to pay all your bills. Okay, I'm not talking about going on vacations, dining out, like going to the movies, nothing like that. I'm talking about what you're currently paying for every single month, what your credit cards are already signed up for a monthly subscription, so that you know exactly what your expenses are. Second thing that I would knock out on top of that is, how many of those things are you actually getting value from? Okay, so if you're subscribing to cable and you really only are watching a couple of shows on TV, is that really something you want to keep subscribing to? I mean, cable bills can be pricey. They can be $60, $70, $100 a month. Are you really getting $60, $70, $100 a month worth of value out of that? A lot of these days, you can go to something like Netflix or Hulu, which is only $10 a month, and you can get a lot of great content. You can get TV shows, you can get movies, you can get a lot of stuff for a lot cheaper these days. So really evaluate what it is. And this is not just about cable, but everything that you have subscribed to right now. Are you really getting the value that you're contributing to? That's something you really got to decide, okay? Because the first thing you can do to get closer to being able to do music licensing full time is reduce all of the bills that you possibly can, right? You can only control what's in your power right now. Now, let's say your bills are at $2,000 a month, but there's about $200 worth of stuff that you could really live without, that you really don't need. Maybe that cable subscription bill, it's not really something that you're getting a lot of value of, or maybe it's something else. There's some other product or service that you're using every single month, but you're not really finding that it's just kind of just always being charged, but you're not really getting a lot of value out of it. And maybe, this is another thing, is it steering you more towards doing this full time? That's another thing. Like, there's a lot of products and things that we like to buy, but they take up all of our free time. They kind of get us distracted. They don't really put us in our studios. They don't drag us or pull us or attract us into making more music and being more productive. So really think about that. How many of those bills could actually be completely eliminated? How many things could you actually cancel and get that $2,000 number maybe down to $1,800 or $1,700, right? So that's really the first thing that you should start looking at. Which one of those things you can really knock out? Normally rent or your mortgage payment, your housing is normally the biggest bill that you're paying right now. So If there's anything you can do to reduce that, try to reduce that. Sometimes you can get refinance deals where you can lower that payment. If you're renting, maybe there's an extra room. You can maybe think about renting it out. Maybe there's other things you can do to sort of try to reduce that number. A lot of times we can't. So that's one of those like very, it's a questionable thing. If you can do something about that, add another roommate, reduce your expenses, great. Then you can really cut down on your living expenses. If you can't, you really don't want to share your space with somebody else or whatever, okay, you can't do much about that. But normally that's the biggest expense. And I remember being in LA, it was always like sharing a room. I'd always share a room with somebody, and there'd be like 4 or 5 of us crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment. So one person would take the living room, 2 of us would take one bedroom, and 2 of us would take the other. Now, I understand a lot of you guys, maybe if you're older, that's impossible. You're not going into that. But some of you younger guys, if you have your own room right now, you have your own apartment, and you're paying a lot of money in an expensive city, maybe thinking about getting into more of a shared space to really reduce those costs. It's not a long-term thing. You're not going to be, rooming with somebody for the rest of your life, but just for the, initial part of this part of your life where you're trying to really establish yourself in the TV film licensing business. If you can reduce it and you can handle sharing your space a little bit more, it's something to consider. Another thing you can think about reducing: lunches, coffee, right? Things that you're doing every single day. Let's say you go to work and you buy even if it's a cheaper, let's say $10 lunch, which includes a drink or something like that. You add up a $10 lunch every single day you go to work. Let's say you have 4 weeks in a month, 5, 10, 15, 20, that's 20 days times $10, right? You are adding up a lot of money at the end of the month that you don't really need to be spending if you could just go to the grocery store, buy some fixings to make yourself a sandwich, or get a hot pocket, or get something that you can literally buy in bulk, buy in mass, bring it to your workplace, heat it up, put it in a lunch bag or something like that, and eat your lunch at work or whatever. That will immediately reduce your living expenses, and you'll see a drastic increase in the amount of money that you're saving and putting away in your bank account. Coffee is huge. Those things that you buy every single day that you don't really think about it. It's like, oh, I'm only getting it's a $2 coffee, $3 coffee. At the end of the month and at the end of the year, you're talking about thousands of dollars that if you had just bought your own grounds, you just got your own coffee and kind of put it in maybe a thermos that stays warm all day, bring it with you to work, right? Or wherever you go. Stuff like that. I mean, it seems silly and it's a cliche, but it really does add up at the end of the day. If you can really, everything that you can possibly cut down right now will definitely get you closer and closer and faster to full-time income. You've got to basically make choices. That's really what I'm trying to get at with this video, is you can choose to spend a lot more money on things if you feel like it makes your life more enjoyable. But just know that every unneeded expense that you add to your life puts your full-time income further and further away. Okay, so the more that you can get out of your life, the things that aren't really pulling you towards doing this full-time, the faster you can get to meeting your financial goal of being able to quit your job and actually do this full-time. So when it comes down to getting paid, again, only 4 times a year, this is why budgeting is so important. So if you can do this now and you can start really putting these like concrete numbers down and knowing exactly how much money you need per month, well, then it's just a matter of you multiply that by 3, right? Let's say you get your number down to $1,500. You can squeeze out $500 a month that you just don't really need to pay. Well, $1,500 times 3, you're at $4,500 for, I know that's probably very cheap. And a lot of you guys are like, what are you talking about? Nobody can live for $1,500. You absolutely can in most cities, as long as you're being creative and you're willing to make those sacrifices and cut out things that you don't really need. But that would be $4,500 in a quarter. So there you go. That's the number that your royalties need to hit per royalty checks, at least $4,500, right? Consistently, then okay, now I'm at a place where maybe I can get out of my day job and start transitioning to doing this full time. So at least you have a particular specific number that you can be going for, right? When you get started in this business, people want 6 figures, they want $1 million, they just want these large numbers. I can tell you, getting a specific number is so powerful. It's actually the only way that you're going to be able to do this full time, because you need to know exactly what your freedom point is. They call it your financial freedom point. What's the number that your royalty checks need to hit that you can finally go, okay, now I'm getting this consistently. Now I can actually do this full time. I can get out of my other work obligations, or at least reduce them more and more, and now really focus on this. Of course, getting those upfront sync fees in between your royalty checks is really, really helpful too. I can tell you that for me, my sync fees are not what I live off of. They're just sort of like icing on the cake. I love them. And when they come in big, they really come in big. And I love that. But I've always focused on my royalties as being my primary bread and butter. That's always been what I think of as when I'm paying my bills, right? And I'm just living, paying for my housing, paying for my utilities, all that good stuff. My royalty checks need to be taking care of all of that. And that's what I use them for primarily. And anything on top of that goes into saving, investing in the future, that kind of thing, whatever you want to do above and beyond that. Sync fees, that's just sort of the icing on the cake. I would not look at sync fees in terms of that should be what you rely on to be paying your bills. Like, because I'll be honest, sometimes you'll have dry spells in your career where like 3 months, 4 months go by and no gigs come to you for upfront sync fees, right? Not library gigs or something else. But when somebody has a commercial and they need you to make music, there's dry spells in this business where not a lot of stuff is going on. There might be a year where just there's not a lot of activity with your contacts. So if you're relying on that upfront sync fee money to pay your bills, you're in big, big trouble. That's why I always think the long-term passive income through your royalties is the smarter way to go. So anyways, I hope that helps you guys out. Comment on this video. Let me know what some of your concerns are. Does the fact that only getting paid 4 times a year freak you out? Is that something that's really actually getting in the way of you seeing how this could be a reality for you? It's definitely possible, and it takes a little bit of training, and you do have to sort of have more of a, that's why it's, having that long-term mindset is very, very helpful, and not thinking about what do I get next week? When am I going to get my first paycheck? And, if you're always focused on that, you're going to like lose the bigger picture, which is this is long-term passive income that can last you years and years, decades and decades, if you want to be consistent with it. So let me know, what are your guys' concerns? What are some of the things that you feel like you need to get better at in terms of budgeting? Or what are some things that you feel like, I wish I could take that out of my life, but I have some anxiety about like losing this or losing that or cutting this expense out of my life. I really think that I need that stuff. You guys might find, and I'll tell you this from my personal experience, I thought I needed a lot of stuff until I started cutting a lot of unnecessary stuff out. And what you'll find that, when you start cutting out unneeded things, distractions in your life, you actually will open up more doors for more productivity and more awesome things to come into your life. So just keep that in mind, that you might feel a little bit weird about starting to live more of a minimal lifestyle, but you'll actually find that bigger and bigger opportunities actually come into your life once you get rid of all the noise. And right now we all have a lot of noise, I myself included. There's a lot of things I can still work on to get myself much more focused on what I really want to focus on. So those are my thoughts on it. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and please don't forget, subscribe if you like this content and like this video if you liked it.